YouTube, it's Mickey, and I am here today to do a book review of the book The Vegetarian by Kang. I read this last week. It only took me a day to read it. It's a very short book, but it packs a really huge punch. It's very fast paced, and I really enjoyed it. The story is about Young Hee, who is a Korean woman who has pretty much spent her whole life doing what she's been told. Her father was physically abusive towards her. Her husband is an ass, to put it the simplest way. He's just a very selfish, self-absorbed person who doesn't really care for her in any way, shape, or form, really. And she's pretty much just gotten through life by just kind of following the motions and doing what everyone else says. And then she has this dream, this very bloody, violent dream in which she encounters this figure that she says is familiar to her yet strange, and she's afraid of this figure because this figure is very violent, very powerful, and there's these images of this person, this creature, whatever it is, sort of tearing through flesh, and there's all these images of blood and meat, and she decides from this dream that she's going to stop consuming meat. She thinks that by stopping consuming meat, it'll stop the dreams and possibly stop this figure, this creature, from leaving her dreams and becoming reality. Because there's something, like I said, there's something really familiar about this feature. There's about this creature, something very realistic about it. I think she feels that if she stops consuming animal flesh, she will sort of rid herself of these animalistic desires. But that doesn't work. She stops eating meat and she still has the dreams. And I think that she comes to realization that this isn't a part of she isn't gathering this from animal flesh. She's gathering this, I think, from her own humanity and who she is as a person. This is not about animals. This is about being human. And so she decides she's not going to be human anymore. And she decides that she would rather be a plant, a tree to be specific. It sounds crazy, it sounds insane, but Kang tells this story in such a beautiful way that I don't even know if I can give it justice. The story is told in 3 parts. The first part is by her husband, the second part her brother-in-law, and the third part is by her sister. Her husband is a awful human being who is really self-absorbed and doesn't really care about anything and anyone. The only thing that he likes about Young Hee is that she does what he says when he says it and takes care of all of his needs and doesn't make a fuss, and that's pretty much the only thing that endears her to him in any way, shape, or form. And so he is very upset when she decides to stop eating meat because it's pretty much the first time that she's ever defied him. He admits up front, which I thought was really interesting, that he is a very mediocre person. Like, he doesn't, he is not outstanding in anything. He just kind of toes the line. He has a mediocre job. He looks mediocre. He doesn't attempt to be anything great, but he also doesn't want to draw attention to himself. He doesn't want to draw attention to himself, and he doesn't want to draw attention to his wife, and she ends up doing that by choosing not to eat meat. And so around this time, when she starts to affect the way that people view him, when people start looking at him differently, is when he gets her family involved. And the brother-in-law, the way that he views Young Hee is he develops a artistic and sexual obsession with her. And he also, also sort of starts to envision this sort of, animalistic plant, but also flower-based sexual reproduction type image that he has in his head that he wants to paint of her. And the two of them develop this interesting sort of relationship because he listens to her. He actually listens to her. He actually hears what she wants. And it seems that he may also identify with her because he also seems to have this sort of heaviness, this sort of weight on himself that he wishes that he could let go and get rid of, which Young Hee has slowly but surely managed to do. She, by giving up meat, she also slowly gives up everything else. She gives up meat. She gives up taking care of the household. She pretty much just gives all of everything that sort of makes her human. She sort of gives all of that up. And there's this strong desire, I think, from all of the characters, in a sort to be able to do the same. I think that a lot of the characters kind of envy her for being able to do this, especially the sister. The sister's point of view is last, and it is my favorite. And she sort of just looks at she talks a lot about duty and all of the things that she's sort of done in her life because it was sort of her duty to do so. She was a dutiful sister, so she tried as hard as she could to take care of Young Hee because she's her older sister. And she tries to take care of Young Hee and protect her from her father as best as she could. And then she gets married like she's supposed to, and she has a kid like she's supposed to, and she takes care of home. She works so that her husband can be an artist. She just does a lot of things for duty, and she makes all of these choices without really asking herself, what do I want? She just does what she's supposed to do, and she's becoming weighed down by it. And I feel like there's this, as she watches Young Hee, there is an envy that she starts to feel from seeing Young Hee, because the Young Hee doesn't have any of these things anymore. She doesn't have a lot of the things that all these characters struggle with. She doesn't struggle with the insecurities that her husband struggles with. She doesn't struggle with the sexual desires or the need for artistic expression that her brother-in-law suffers from. She doesn't suffer from lust or the feeling that you're not achieving anything. She doesn't, she's not weighed down by duty like her sister is. She's just free. But that freedom comes at a great price. And I think that that's what this book sort of looks at. Like, what is the price for being human? To be a human being in the world. What do you have to give up to do that? And if you were to say to yourself, well, I don't want this life, I want to do something else, what would you have to give up in order to do so? And I feel like this book really covers that really well. And I definitely highly recommend reading it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I've had like a super hard time trying to put my thoughts into words for this book. I'm really rusty. So I hope that what I just said encourages you to pick the book up, because it really is a great read.